Hope you had a lovely break away. We're going to be doing some oil pastels, especially since it's so miserable outside and rainy and grey. So some zappy, bright, fun, highly saturated, you can't go wrong oil pastels. I thought sounds spot on for the first class back in January. Now, to keep with our zappiness, I've got a luscious orange rose that I'm going to be using for your demo. Obviously I've sent you through other images, but this one just looked absolutely delicious to do in the oil pastels. So I've got this printed out here. It's by Jess Bailey. It's all royalty free off Pexels. Check them out, the link's below if you want to have a go. And my other things that you're going to obviously need if you want to follow along with me, I've got some smooth cartridge paper. This is about 220 GSM because I'm going to be using some baby oil to give me a nice transition of colour change. So it does need to be over that 200 GSM, definitely, or you might find your paper starts to suffer. Pencil, standard HB. Then I've got some oil pastels here. It's a set of Faber-Castell. There's lots of different brands on the market. Try them out, see what you like. I personally am a big fan of Faber. I think they're a really good brand that give you a fair price for a decent quality. So I would recommend them if you're looking online and trying to get a good bargain in the January sales. I've got a synthetic head brush that I'm going to be using for blending. I've also got a touchon. So it's basically a cardboard pencil which can be used for blending as well. You don't need to, it's up to you if you want to go down different routes. You could use a cottonwool bud, you could use a piece of kitchen roll as you can see here. And then obviously I've got my baby oil. There's various brands, they all work the same, so don't worry about the brand, but it will give you a really nice result towards the end of the project if you use the baby oil for getting your blending and smoothing out those lumps and bumps that is associated with a bit of oil pastel usage. Now to get things going, first of all I need to get to my pencil, so I'm going to move that out of the way. Give it a little bit of a dash down because I've already managed to get it dirty. 2 seconds into the demo and I'm well away. And I'm going to start off drawing my rose. So the rose is going to be an increase in scale because I'm going to do it in A4. So I've marked an A4 on an A3 piece of paper. It's always wise to give yourself a little bit of slack and border whenever you're drawing, because sometimes you go up, sometimes you go down in scale. So to give yourself that leeway is a really good idea. The other thing that I've done is I folded in my rose, I put it down in my bottom left hand corner and worked out my aspect ratio, and the reference image that I've got here is slightly short of an A4 size. So you can see here's my A4 and I've had to come down about 1.5 centimetres just to make sure that I don't stretch the image. Now you can use pencil to draw with oil pastels, but you do have to be aware that oil pastels, especially these lighter orangey yellow tones, are very translucent. They're a lot like watercolour. You will see the the pencil lines coming through. You therefore need to be quite soft and delicate with your pencil lines. Use a rubber, make sure your picture is nice and linear and clean and free from any errors before we get onto the secondary stage. I will talk you through it, but always keep it in mind. Now to start off with, I'm going to just mark out some rough guide points. So first of all, I'm looking at my reference image and I'm looking down here because I can see this petal comes into this side here and I've only got a little bit left on the bottom right hand corner. I've got a few petals kind of coming off at different points, which can be really handy. You can get a little bit of a dot to dot going on with your paper. So once you mark those around the edge of your reference, you then need to transfer them across. I'm doing it by, you could measure, obviously, you know, if you're, I'd say the A4 is about double the size of the reference image, so you know to take that and multiply it by 2, but I can roughly see it's going to be about there for that point. Then if that's halfway, it's slightly shy, that's going to be for that point. Then if I've got halfway, so I'm using that halfway, then you should end up with that one being there and probably that one being about there. Then I've got this point, it's going to be around here. And remember, these are just guidelines. You might end up fluxing them a little bit and changing them as you go along. It's absolutely fine. Nothing is set in stone. That's the joy of working in pencil. So if that's halfway point, you can see it's slightly shy. So if I find the halfway of that line, slightly shy to the left, and I've got a basic starting point. Then I'm going to hold my pencil towards the end like I always do, and I'm going to start drafting it in. Now it's good to get in the big areas. A lot of people get into this tight and then they find they've gone too left or they're too small. Get the big structure in to start off with. For me, you can see like this leaf is quite a nice big structure here, so I'm going to use that. I'm going to come up around there, and that pretty much comes vertically down here. So you can see that shape there. Then I've got this one just kind of coming in over here. I've got this one coming up with that. Now it's slightly shy of that gap, so it's around about there. And then I can start drafting in this basic arch, which that's going to kind of sweep along here, whacking around the corner like that. That's coming up like that. Then I've got this one coming in over here, coming up, hitting that side part, coming in at a slight angle, going up and round, looping down. So you can see my sketch lines are really sketchy. I'm not too worried. I'm going to bring that down a little bit, bring that up a little bit. Then I've got that line coming in over there. I've got this petal coming up, coming down. That one is coming in where these two intersect, coming down. So that's across there, probably bring it down a little bit more. And then I've got to start filling in here. So got a little bit of an arch. Basically, I've got another bit coming in here, that coming up there. And you're dealing with the pattern and the shape that you can see in the flower. Okay, that's got to come up here a little bit more, down like that, and then that's coming in there. And you can see there, I've got roughly starting off point, and it's really sketchy. It's not perfect, but it's a beginning. You're making an estimate. That's the whole point of drawing, is you're estimating where things are. And then as you go through the process, you get more and more refined, and you kind of get a better and better guess until you get completely accurate. Right, so you can see I've got that. I'm then going to start getting my lines a little bit more accurate. And my hand's immediately slid halfway down my pencil line. It's coming up to this point. That's got a edge to it because it's a roll. Got an arch over here. I'm actually going to bring that in. So you see what I mean by I'm changing my mind. It's absolutely fine to change your mind. Nobody's going to shoot you for it. I'm ended up a little bit short when I've drawn this, because you can see I've moved that line and just knocked that down. Which is why I said to give yourself that leeway. It's only natural that things have a habit of like jiggling around, really. you should be getting something like that. So now I'm going to come in with a eraser and just clean up all my guidelines. Okay, so you should be having something that looks fundamentally like this. You can see mine's a little bit darker, and personally I'd let you go as dark as, but because of the camera I want you to just see it nice and clearly. It's working on a very crisp edged line drawing. I'm also a little bit mucky, really should get in there and clean out some of these pencil smudges, but ultimately, hopefully, she says with her fingers crossed, the oil pastels will cover up most of my sins. So once you've got this level down, then we get into the exciting stage of the project, and that is going to be working with your oil pastels. Okay, I've got them there. Now, I've got a lot of yellows and oranges in there. Yeah, there she says, trying to spell words out. Yellows and oranges. Okay, I'm going to end up pulling out a selection of the pastels that I think are going to make my life a lot easier to get to grips with this image with. Now, white, you can see how my white has a hard life. White is always a good colour. It will blend, it will lighten. So never underestimate the power of white. I might also increase the orange, so I'll need a bit of red. So I'm going to take the rest of these and put them to one side. I've got the lid there. I'm going to put those in the lid, because if I put them straight on my paper, it's going to make my paper mucky. Already, I don't know how I manage it, but I'm already mucky. Now with the oil pastels, it's kind of hard to make really strong dark colours light. So you want to work light to dark. And you want to probably work section by section, because the heat from your hand, if you're leaning on it, it's going to start to smudge it. You can use a piece of tissue or a spare piece of paper just to lean on to make sure that doesn't happen. Or if you want to, as I'm going to do, I'm going to work from the top downwards, which should help me not to lean on it. But there might be cases when I go back just to add on a bit more dark or a bit more light, because this is all about contrast. The light and dark give you the form. So keep that in mind. Now I've got my yellows. I'm going to go for probably a little bit more of that one, because it's a little bit more orangey yellow. Up here. When you're applying these oil pastels, the main problem a lot of students get is they don't press hard enough. You want a smooth surface paper, because if you've got anything with texture, it gets even harder to do it. And then I'm going to put down my light section, and I'm actually putting my light section down probably bigger than the light section you can see in the reference image. I'm applying quite a lot of pressure, and I'm getting a decent coverage. And can you see that pencil line coming through? That's what I was worried about, so do keep that in mind. Once I've got that down, I'm going to start then putting in some of my orange next to it. And I'm keeping my eye on here, because remember, your eye should be on your reference picture 70% of the time, and only 30% of your time when you're drawing. Keep note of the direction, because I know the petal is going that way out, so you can see here I'm trying to get my pastel to follow the contour of the petal, flowing from the centre outwards. And then I'm going to take my yellow, and I'm going to work my yellow into my orange, so that I can get a nice graduation of tonal change, like so. Let me have an orange, and like nice orange juice at this moment of time. Right, be careful of any cross-contamination if you've got darker points. I'm going to bring this down here, and I've got a little yellow smudge up in the corner. Really good fit clear. Don't be worried, you see like you get all these little bits of oil pastel? Don't worry about those, just ignore those, keep working it up. And then I'm going to come down to a little bit more of a sharper orange down here. A bit of a lighter tone down here, so I'm going to increase my yellow, and I'm applying a lot of pressure. Don't be worried about applying too much pressure. Just mix on the surface. Then I've got this darker splodge, so I'm going to take a purple, dark purple, and I'm going to put that down there. Try and avoid the black at this stage. I'm going to grab my orange, put my orange into the purple. I think it's like that slightly darker tone, but it's subtle, it's not really harsh. So you can see like that. Now if you want to, you could take your blending tool and make sure it's clean, because I've got a dirty end there. It's a little bit dirty, but I should do it. You can always look at trying to blend this out. So you could take your cotton wool bud, a bit of tissue, it's up to you. But you can start using the tool to manipulate the pastel on the surface of the colour. You see how I've got that on there? I've already smudged it over. I told you I would. Always manage it. Smudge it in. You can, if you want to as well, take something sharp, not really sharp, but fairly sharp, and you can scratch through the layers. That can be quite good for detail as well. So you can get something like that if you wanted to. Now, if you're going to look at using the baby oil, then you want to take your brush. I've got my baby oil like this. I'm going to pour out a little bit onto my brush. You can obviously pour some out into a container, and then you can brush it on to the surface. Now by brushing it onto the surface, it smooths out the oil pastel. You can get some really nice results. You may want to work light to dark though, because you see how I'm picking up the oil pastel on the end of the brush? If I put that into a lighter section now, that will cross-contaminate it. So it does mean that I'll need to grab my tissue and wipe my brush to stop that from happening. So keep that in mind. Just like so. Right, so now you've got the idea, it's your turn. I'm going to work across here, you work on yours, and we'll see how they both go. So you can see I'm just repeating the process. Put down my lighter yellows and then putting down my orange, and then I'm going to work the two into one another. Now as you work something into each other, try and be a little bit softer on the downward pressure that you're applying. And with lighter yellow I'm applying a lot more pressure, which is picking up that orange and moving it into the lighter yellow sections. I'm going to just come down here and work that in as well. And I want a little bit of yellow, orange on the tip, because you can see the orange down here. You can as well, so like some of this looks like a little bit of a lighter yellow. You might want to grab a little bit of white and just exaggerate that highlight on the petal. White can also be a really good colour to blend in other colours with the oil pastels. Here, I could add a little bit of white in here, just increase that highlight, because like I said earlier, it's all about tonal contrast, the light and dark within this picture to get it to work and look correct. You can always take your other yellow, so I've got a little bit of a lighter yellow there, I might put that in and work that into the whiter areas, so I'm getting a larger variety of colours on the surface, which will also make it look more natural. Okay, so I've got that petal rough and done. I could go a little bit darker in here. But it's all going to be about personal taste and how far you want to take it, how far you can see the tones in your own reference image as well. Big impact. careful not to go too dark like around here. I'm going to wait until I've done most of it, and then I'll come back probably with a stronger darker shade just to add in, because like I said, it's easier to make things too dark and then you can't make it light again. Grab some baby oil, smooth that out. Let's try and take off the excess very gently. Got a little bit of baby oil back in that soft light area. That looks nice and natural. And it's basically, you just keep repeating, as I said for that first one. Doing one petal at a time. Try and smooth out any of the bits of kind of, I don't know what you'd call that, or bits of pastel that come off. You get a bit of a build up. Do consider your pressure. You can be softer. Once you've got a decent layer down on the surface of the paper, if you apply a little bit more of a softer downward pressure, you can manipulate the colours and push things together. You don't need to be applying such strong, hard movements. You'll find that if you've got too much baby oil on your brush, that not much happens. So if you're finding that you're trying to apply downward pressure and you're trying to move the colour around and it's not really going anywhere, it's probably because you've put too much baby oil on the surface of the paper. Just take your brush, put it through a clean dry cloth, and then work back into it, gently working the baby oil off. See here, I'm just lifting it off because that's precisely what I've done around this point. And you can always work back into a baby oil. Now usually it's better to work back into your baby oil if you've given it a few minutes to settle. So I've done some down here. I'm just working back into it with a little bit of white to lighten up because I feel like I've gone a little bit too dark. A few patches around there just to blend it in, and you'll find that it'll be absolutely fine. Don't worry about, once you put baby oil on you can't work back into it. You can. If you work too soon, you'll probably find that you'll start taking off colour though, so do be careful. Give it, 5 minutes to settle down. Right, so I've got the main bulk of the artwork down, and I just need to go in and add a little bit of darker tone here and there, just to try and get rid of some of the pencil lines, because I'm sure you can probably see them, and to give it a little bit more of an increase in contrast. So I'm going to use a dark green. This is the darkest green that I've got in my set. You could go for a dark purple if you want to, it'll work the same. I would recommend that you also have a piece of paper or something to protect your drawing, because if you lean on it at this stage, you're going to start lifting it off onto the side of your hand. You can already see how I'm getting a little bit of an orange tip go on my fingers. Now if this is wet with baby oil, again you need to let it just dry off, because if you put this down on top of baby oil, it will also take the colour off. So you can see I'm just using a scrap of material, and I'm going to increase some areas where there's a little bit more of a darker tone to add drama and make it look like it's got sections of shadow to recess the petals. The trick is not to go over the top. Less is more, as they say in the art world. You can get that green. You can always use your tush on, make sure it's clean, and blend that in a little bit. Remember, some tush ons that are pointed, you see here it's lifting it off a little bit. So you might find that you need to use your orange to blend it in, rather than a blending tool. If you're doing this on top of yellow, then you use yellow to blend it in. Build that layer up, because I was just taking off a bit too much by using that tush on. I need to add the colour back into the surface. Can you see how that's starting to look like it's recessed away? Obviously I've got a lot more to do, but so will you. Ha ha ha. And let's just increase this shadow a little bit more. I'm going to take red on top of this. It's quite ready in tone, so have a look and see what you can see and use what works for you. Remember that when these print out, everyone, you will get slightly different colour variations. So you can see I'm just building this up, and I'm also adding in extra reds and oranges if I want to, building a bit more detail and working it in, that contrast. Being consistent with my green, putting down a bit of green and then adding in my other colours to blend it in to my petals. And if you want to, you could always get a bit of white, add in a little bit of highlight and some of the bits you want to come forward as well. And you should be ending up with something that looks like that. Right, so you could work up to a higher level, but as always time is against me. I'm just going to put in this background, whereby I'm going to use a soft light blue grab that now out of here. Start bringing this into the background, which is nice and easy because it's just one flat colour. Be careful not to pick up any cross-contamination of the orange, or you'll end up with brown smears across it. You may find that it's easier to get the large areas of colour down and then go around the edge of it. Just like that. And try and take off those bits of dusty pastel because you get the lumps a little bit. Use a bit of tissue or a bit of material. Then I'm going to wipe with my brush and smooth out that background as well. Right, take some of that baby oil. And mine might go a little bit turquoisey because I've got a bit of yellow cross-contamination on my brush. I haven't had time to clean it, but it gives you the idea. And there you go. A little bit of orangey dust I just need to get off, so I'm using a tissue just to lightly dust it down from doing that darker shadow section. But generally you should end up with something that looks just like this. I hope you've enjoyed it and that this gives you an opportunity to practice a great medium. It's full of potential, and I'll see you next time. Bye everyone.